In the winter, when the land is bleak, the wind stiff, the cold skies early dark, that is when we most need the warmth of our traditions, the ones our parents or their grandparents brought with them when they arrived here carrying almost nothing else. This is a celebration of small things, an ornament, a recipe, a carol, a prayer. Words and objects that can call you home in a moment, whether you've wandered across the globe or settled in the neighborhood where you were raised. They're gifts, the first and most enduring we ever received. We've gathered them in a holiday scrapbook of stories and memories. Each one is as unique as the family that made it, yet they're all connected, and they form a bridge across the generations. A bridge that rests on our family's cornerstones.
Christmas was laughter. I mean, Christmas was fun. It's a wonderful thing when the whole family's gathered around together and everybody's in a good mood because it's Christmas anyway, and you're all feeling good about everything, really.
We'd all have a big dinner at home, and my father would invite all his friends, because that's a custom of Lebanese people to invite someone to sit with them on the dining table. And we'd all have a dinner, and then we'd go to church.
Hanukkah was always a family time. Every night you'd light the menorah, so every kid we'd all have our own menorahs. And every night you get a present, and you play a little spinning game called dreidel with little chocolate coins. So it was a holiday that was, for kids, it was all fun. It was all family and all fun. It brings back really nice memories.
Polish or Greek, Christian or Jew, we have this in common. The season begins when people gather. Every winter holiday has at its heart an open home.
A lot of people would come during the course of the day and the evening from different walks of life. For example, my parents always invited the elderly Greek men that never married. Many of them never had families. Or anybody to visit with, any relatives in Toledo. They lived alone in rooming houses in downtown Toledo, and those people look forward to this party every year because they probably got one of the best meals, home cooked of course, that they ever had. Plus they had a place to go on Christmas, which I'm sure was a lonely time for them.
The tradition of hospitality is a candle in the window, first kindled centuries ago in Ireland to welcome strangers. It is a hot drink offered to carolers. It is an extra place at a Polish dinner table left empty on Christmas Eve.
It has to stay empty. In case a person, a lonely person appears at your door, then you have to invite him or her and share your supper with this person. So you see, it can mean different things for different people. As a general rule, it's reserved for an unexpected visitor, but it can mean something else if you're missing someone, if your family member is missing. The year of 1981, when the martial law was introduced in Poland on December 13th, and at that time my brother was imprisoned for his political activities, and that was a very memorable and sad Christmas. And that empty chair and empty plate had a special significance for us.
The kitchen, where families gather and the holidays are made. The scents that swirl from the stove steam the window and mist the eye, evoking moments spent lingering over meals in the heart of the home. In Poland, where holiday meals are elaborate and rich with symbolism, Christmas Eve's dinner begins when the first star appears in the night sky.
Mom used to say to us, today we say to kids, you watch for Santa, he'll be coming. Of course, we're always looking for the first star to appear in the east. And I think it was more of a way to get us out of the way and out of the kitchen and from snacking and so forth. So everyone's looking for the first star and the beginning of Vigilia, which is the evening dinner, which was meatless. And being it was meatless, you would think, geez, there isn't a whole lot to eat with regards to meatless foods on Christmas Eve, but there were. Needless to say, the herring, the sledge was there. Then Mom would always make pierogi, and she could make three kinds. My favorite, the dry cottage cheese, mashed potatoes, or she could put the kapusta, the cabbage, inside the pierogi. You could make prune soup, even a mushroom soup could be made. And of course, the placek, that's the Polish coffee cake. Those things were on the table, as well as real butter, the amenities. By the time you put all those things on a meatless dinner table, it was really quite a bit of food.
I remember making my first Christmas Eve supper, and everybody left hungry. After they were done. I wasn't much of a cook.
My wife did her best to prepare the Christmas Eve supper, and we had 12 traditional dishes. So although we had 12 dishes, they were on a short side, so even after eating 12 dishes, we were not very full. It has improved since then. So now we have wonderful meals.
Thank you very much.
Eastern European families often begin the Christmas meal by breaking a wafer of unleavened bread called opłatek.
It started with Dad, and he would take the wafer, and with that wafer, he would go to Mom and wish her the best of health, and she would break off a piece, and they would each have a half. And with the opłatki, they then would share it with us, starting with the oldest, my brother, and working its way down. And again, we would embrace and kiss and wish each other a healthy new year to come.
The Polish Vigilia is set on a table covered with straw, placed there to recall the manger.
One of the things we did in our household, which we always look forward to as children, was when the meal was over. You were to lift up the tablecloth, and you could take out a piece of straw. You find the end of the straw and pull it out. And the length of the straw was a measure of long life and good luck, as we'd say, 100 lat in Polish. Well, she would always remind us to put long pieces of straw where Dad was going to sit. So Dad wasn't going to lose out on this. Wherever he was going to pull a piece of straw, it was almost going to start at the other end of the table.
In Italy, the Christmas Eve meal prepares the family to celebrate Christ's birth. Like the Vigilia, it is often a meatless dinner.
The 7 fishes, as my mother had explained to me, came about because of Christ feeding the multitudes with 5 loaves and 2 fishes, and that came up to the number 7. And what you do is you're eating fish and you're not eating meat. You're abstaining from meat because you are depriving yourself in preparation for the birth of the bambino right after midnight. We had, when I was growing up, and continue on to have fishes like anchovy, linguine with calamari, smelts, bacala, and not too much else around. The 7 fishes were the important thing, and keeping in mind that we were sort of like depriving ourselves. I know that doesn't sound like we're depriving ourselves when we're going to eat 7 fishes, but you're only supposed to taste them so that you could be sure and get the 7 in, so that then that would ensure that you would have enough food to feed your family and friends, because friends are very important for the coming year.
Hanukkah commemorates a miracle that gave light for 8 days to the Maccabees in their temple in the 4th century before Christ. In the way they prepare traditional foods, Jewish families recall that miracle every year.
Food for Hanukkah, because Hanukkah celebrates a miracle of oil in the lamp. So what it is fried food. And the big fried food is potato pancakes, which is basically ground up potatoes, grind up onions, put in a little egg and baking soda, and you fry them.
The cooking of the latkes was very important, and the cooking and eating it, and the smell. I mean, the smell in the house, and the aroma. And I remember reeking of potatoes for days.
There's only one way to do it, and that is to grate the potatoes by hand. I do not use a Cuisinart, and whenever I have done potato pancakes, I have done them by hand. There's kind of a little saying in terms of you have to get some knuckle in there to make them kind of taste good. A little bit of knuckle, so.
And you know, even though I may talk about, you know, reeking for days, I mean, it wasn't a nasty kind of, you know, being odoriferous. It was kind of nice. I mean, it was good to eat and good to smell and pleasant.
Ich bin a kleine Dreidel, gemacht bin ich von Blei. Zulommer alle spielen in Dreidel 1, 2, 3. Oi, Dreidel, 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 oi, dreh sich der Dreidel, dreh. Zulommer alle spielen in Dreidel 1 und 2.
Now, the good part was they had this little dreidel game where you spin this top. There's 4 Hebrew letters around it. And you either toss a coin into the pot or you take a coin out, depending what it lands on, and they're usually chocolate coins. So you would get to eat a lot of chocolate.
Nun, Gimel, Shin, Hey. The letters on a dreidel top stand for the words, a great miracle happened there. The letter that appears when the top stops spinning dictates a player's fortune. Nun, do nothing. Gimel, take all the candy. Shin, add a candy to the pot. Hey, take half the candies in the pot. Around the time that they celebrate Christmas, some African Americans also observe Kwanzaa, a cultural holiday with food and tradition rooted in the African harvest.
It coincides at the time of the year when actually in Africa was or is harvest time. It's celebrated from December the 26th and it goes on for the whole week to give the community time to be able to focus on the 7 principles of Kwanzaa, which are unity, self-determination, collective work and responsibility, purpose, creativity, and faith in God. It's a wonderful family celebration time.
Tonight we're going to say a libation, which is an African prayer to our ancestors, and just think and reflect on the meaning of Kwanzaa and talk about its principles. And we're going to recognize all of our ancestors from beginning to end, beginning with Narmer, king of Ethiopia, Egypt, Menes, Aha, Zoser, Perhaps. On the 7th day, there's a karamu or a feast, and usually people will eat all the foods that they like, usually soul foods and some African foods, collard greens and rice, yams, coconut, fruits, meats, things like that.
Kwanzaa means many things to me, but basically it means a time of commemorating our heritage, celebrating our culture, as well as giving thanks to God for the many wonderful things that He has given to us.
The recipes for our winter feasts come down through the generations from hand to hand, mother to daughter, grandfather to grandson. They come in pinches, dashes, and handsful, as hard to measure as the love that seasons them.
My sister-in-laws and I every year get together to continue the tradition of making tamales during Christmas. It's the same recipe, over 100 years old. It's amazing. There's not precise measurements. It's just a little handful of this, a handful of that.
We, as kids, we would help, getting the husk together. We would soak the husk. We would clean them out. We would help spread the masa on the husk themselves. And then we made like a little progressive line, just everybody just did something, just went right along, and you know that you're going to have tamales that day.
My mother would always make the tamales from ground one, and the whole family would get involved, all the way from father to mother to daughters to son, and they all had. And by the time you sat down to eat, you could truly say that this had been prepared by the family, not by mom, not by dad.
My mother would start early in December preparing for Christmas because she knew that we wouldn't have a lot of presents, so she knew that the focus would be on food. And she would save her butter and the milk and the eggs and all of the other ingredients which went into baking cookies, pies, and cakes.
Well, my mother baked cookies. She was German background. She made, I wouldn't even be able to spell this. She made a cookie called, and this is German, Springerlis. At least I can say it right. Now, a Springerli was a square cookie. She made it once a year and it had aniseed. It had a kind of an unusual taste. It was baked in there, and then she would, before she put it into the oven, she'd stamp it with these little cookie cutters that would make a pattern. And I'm telling you, man, they were hard. You had to dunk them. You know what dunking is. Dunking was very big then. It was a real art. And with Springerlis, you had to dunk it to make it soft. But boy, once you got that soft, it was good. But otherwise, you could have killed a man with one of those cookies.
My mother would cook up a storm. She made hundreds of pieces of Greek pastries. And she would start on this project right around Thanksgiving. So when we were children, I mean, she would have the ovens going every day after school, and she would be wrapping things very securely with saran wrap and foil and putting them in aluminum pots and pans. And then in our basement, we had this huge metal table that was set up, and Mom would store all the pastries in the basement. Well, what Mom probably figured out after a while was that all four of us would go down to the basement periodically between Thanksgiving and Christmas and just unwrap very carefully and help ourselves to those Greek pastries, probably at 4 o'clock right after school.
One of the things that every family bakes is a special bread during the Christmas time. It's a little semi-sweet bread that they put a coin in the bread. This is a tradition. It's called vasilopita. That's how the bread is called, which means king's pie.
Well, everybody got a designated piece of that Greek sweet bread. Plus, you would also cut a piece of bread for whatever your dad did for a living. And in my case, it was my dad's tavern, his business. And you also cut a piece of bread for the house, meaning the welfare of the home that you lived in, because it was very important to us. And whoever got the coin in their bread, it was said to be the lucky charm. In other words, this coming year would be a very special year for you.
The one that it's in my mind always was about probably 7 years old that I remember, and that was the Christmas that I got the silver coin into the Vasilopita, into that pie, and that was the most exciting, highest. I was the king that day.
From December 6th until Christmas was the period of time in which there was great preparation. Almost the entire month of December was set aside for preparation for the birth of the Bambino. We started polishing the house till it was just extremely clean.
Cleaning the house for the holidays. In Christian homes, it's done not only to prepare for friends and family, but to welcome a baby as well, in a manger, at the center of a nativity scene.
We were given a nativity scene, I think probably, I don't remember what age I was, but very, very young, the one that went into my bedroom. And that's so I could play with it, so that I knew who Mary was, I knew who Joseph was, the baby, I knew that 3 wise men came, I knew that there were shepherds there, and you could begin to tell and relive the whole story of the birth of Christ as you began to play with these little figurines.
The Żubek is a very old Polish word for the manger, and we never put the infant Jesus in the Żubek until Christmas Day. So Mom prepared the manger with the scenes, and it was almost like an enactment of a play as we prepared for Christmas. She'd go get some straw and she'd put all the figurines out, and then on Christmas Day we would see Joseph and Mary waiting in the manger with the cows and the sheep around. But on Christmas morning, then someone, myself, brother or sister, was able to put the infant inside the manger.
The scent of flowers and evergreen boughs. Candlelight reflected in glass. Holiday decorations feast the senses and warm the heart. When the land is frozen, they help us celebrate life. And when the days are short and dark, they bring light. The Hanukkah menorah, the Hanukkah, has 9 candles, 1 for each night the oil burned in the temple, and 1 called the shamash, or servant, used to light the others.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Chanukah. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, she'asa nisim lavoteinu, bayamim hahem, bazman hazeh.
For Kwanzaa, too, candles illuminate a meditation each evening. The Kinara holds 7 candles, 1 black, 3 red, and 3 green. The candles represent Kwanzaa's 7 principles: unity, self-determination, cooperative economics, creativity, collective work and responsibility, purpose and faith. Every child who lies beneath a Christmas tree, gazing up through its sparkling branches, peers back hundreds of years. Our first Christmas trees arrived with German soldiers who fought in the American Revolution. And the Victorian English gave us our style of decorating them.
In July, my father would order ornaments from Germany, and we had the most beautiful Christmas ornaments. And he sold Christmas trees, but before he sold any, he'd go through the batch, and the most beautiful one he would bring home.
One of the things my family always does to this day is all our Christmas cards to each other are all kind of pushed into the branches of the tree. So I remember this tree, and there would be kind of little, you know, the baubles and the decorations and everything hanging off it, and then little presents around the base. And it's something I never forget.
We brought home a lot of ornaments that we made in school, and then my sisters and I would sit around and make sort of like chains out of construction paper. I mean, you would just spend a whole evening doing that, and you would put that on, and very, very proud. It didn't matter if it didn't match. It didn't matter if the colors didn't coordinate. It mattered that you were sitting with your sisters in an evening, and you made it, and you were made it to put on the Christmas tree in preparation for Christmas Day.
So a lot of the decorations were handmade, and we used to load it up. Today they don't load up a tree so much you can see the greenery, but we put this tinsel, we used to call it this kind of stuff, and the stuff that hung down, and lights. And way back, I understand, people actually, and this was before our time, would put lighted candles on a tree. Now, can you imagine that?
It was a remarkable thing to see all those candles burn as high as you can see, and all the kids around, oh, there's a fire here, there's a fire there, and they'd snap their hands and try to put out the fire, and everybody jammed around, and it was kind of an exciting thing.
I'd say the Christmas tree is the one thing that I could do without the least. I could do without the food and the gifts and everything else, but not the Christmas. It'd be pretty tough to do without a Christmas tree. Even over there during the war in Italy, some of the guys they went out and got a little tree of some kind and would bring it into the tent and have a tree. We had a tree of sorts in the tent. I can't remember in my whole life ever not having a Christmas tree at Christmas.
My brother was in Germany. He was in the Battle of the Bulge, and my mother missed him, so she kept the Christmas tree up all until he finally came home in the spring, and the Christmas tree was there with all the ornaments, everything on it, but no needles all around the tree. They had dropped to the floor, and his gifts were still there waiting. And he said to my mother, I got your message. He knew how much he'd been missed.
To remember miracles that happened thousands of years ago, we give one another gifts at the holidays. And the joy that each gift imparts is its own small miracle. The reason that finding and offering the perfect present, no matter how modest, will always be a part of our traditions.
Like many families, I suppose, we did have traditional things, little things that we would give each other every year. I mean, I buy my mom and my sister buys my dad a certain type of candy, chocolates, every year. I think I could buy, my sister and I could buy them gifts costing $1 million. And if we forgot the traditional chocolates, I think they'd be devastated. I think they could keep the million. You know, that type of thing that's been going on for, well, more than 40 years now.
I recall the gift giving. You know, Christmas to us today is very gift giving oriented. And I thought back about it, even I was in that spirit. I wanted to give gifts to the family members, mom and dad. So I had saved money, and Dad was always there to say, do you need a couple dollars? And I always remembered where I went and got my gifts. I would go to Hank's Pharmacy on the corner of LaGrange and Austin, and I would usually buy my mother talcum powder. He would have behind at the pharmacy, he sold talcum powder for Mom, or even at that time I could go to Grant's if I wanted to go downtown Christmas shopping.
We had then in Toledo big department stores downtown. Going downtown was the big deal before Christmas. And these department stores would have whole floors devoted to toys. I'd go down with my mother and we'd go to the Lion store, LaSalle and Cook's, Lamson's, Titke's. Titke's was just a regular festival. They had these cheeses out in the aisles, and the place, the smells alone would be worth the trip. It was closest to being at a Christmas festival that you'd ever possibly could experience.
My father gave all of us 50 cents. And we could buy each other a 10-cent gift. My mother and my father, and there were 4 children, so we had 50 cents for it and 10 cents per person. And my brother, who always watched his pennies, my younger brother, would go through the dime store and he'd buy the most that he could get for his money. So one Christmas he got my sister 3 shot glasses. And nobody drank in the house, but that's what he could get for a dime, 3 of them, so he bought those. So he'd have the most and the cheapest, even though it was no value.
One year we got a wagon, and I thought it was a mistake. I thought Santa Claus had meant to leave that at an affluent family's house down the way from us, which was a white family. They had money, and they would get a lot of nice toys. And I thought perhaps the Santa Claus had made a mistake and had really intended to leave this wagon down there, and he made a mistake and left it with us. And I was almost afraid to get in the wagon and get outside to have them see it, because I thought they might suggest that, well, Santa Claus left this here by mistake, please give it to me.
My dad was a tailor, and tradition that he came from was that you would sew up a bag made of a scrap piece of fabric, and this bag was to contain the Hanukkah gelt that you received. Usually what he did was just give it once, and there were several coins. I don't think there was even 50 cents worth in the bag for the entire. It was one time only, and that was it. But it was contained in that bag so that you could jingle it. I mean, that was important.
When I was a little girl, I remember standing by the kitchen stove, and I remember that's where we lit our Hanukkah menorah on the kitchen stove, and then we would get, my brother and I would each get a quarter a night. And when I had children, I kind of developed the same thing. We each lit our own menorahs, or the family menorah too, and then they got a quarter a night. It was after a few years, and once they got a little bit older, and once their friends got presents, then maybe they got a present, but they still got their quarter a night.
You could ask me what I got and I wouldn't be able to tell you. I don't remember the gifts. I remember the feeling. I remember the fun. I remember the laughter. I remember the bundling up with scarves and what we used to call bobble hat, which was knitted hats with a little bobble on the top that every kid has, you know, and going out on a Christmas afternoon after lunch. The kind of the events, the traditions, I suppose, but that's what made them special to me.
After I got married and started my own family and carrying on a lot of the traditions, one of the things that I changed was the gift giving. And I think probably I went overboard, and I began to give many, many more gifts than what should be given at that time. And so I think realizing that, I'm kind of making a little turnaround back again to my roots, realizing that my parents were very right in teaching us that the gifts weren't the important thing.
There are those who say that the reasons for our celebrations each year grow more difficult to find beneath a litter of wrapping paper and tinsel. Yet when the quiet part of the day comes, midnight or morning, it is clear that many still hear a call to worship that has rung without diminishing through the generations.
The Lord be with you.
9 days before Christmas, Mexican families reenact the arrival of Mary and Joseph in Bethlehem with nightly processions known as La Posada, the inn. On Christmas Eve, Las Posadas end when the infant Jesus is placed in his manger. And churches across the city fill with the grandchildren and great-grandchildren of the immigrants who built them.
The Mass was very, very important. Midnight Mass, called Pasterka, began at 11:30. The choir would arrive at 11 and begin singing the kolindy, the Polish Christmas carols, religious Christmas carols. We weren't singing "Here Comes Santa Claus." We were singing in the celebration of the birth of Christ.
In the music that echoes in churches across the city on Christmas, as the voices rise and blend, we hear past and future come together. Children learning a new tongue, grandparents preserving the old, families singing their traditions in words and melodies as pure and simple as the mysteries they celebrate.
I still have to say that one of my favorites is Silent Night, and the way you sing it in Spanish sounds so different than in English, Noche de Paz, it's just a nice flavor to it, it feels peaceful, it sounds more peaceful to me than Silent Night, Noche de Paz, real peaceful. Our first Christmas year, we came here in April of '69, and meeting her family, I didn't know there was any Hispanics in Toledo, it's just one of the things. We came here and they lived in the Trilby area. And one of the uncles lived out in Michigan, in Petersburg. And so we all went there for Christmas. And we sang Silent Night. And I tell you, it gave me goosebumps because I shot back and I just remembered, my aunt and my mom, they all sang too. And of course it was in Spanish, but it didn't sound it sounded beautiful. I mean, just like if I was home, just in a different language, you know.
I'll tell you how my dad did it. And they still do this in some churches. They would turn out all the lights. This was the last song on the agenda. And the organist would start singing, playing that Silent Night, and everybody would sing the 3 verses. And practically everybody knew that song by heart. And they would sing it in the dark with just those Christmas tree lights. And I'm telling you, there wasn't a dry eye in the house. And we would actually sing those in German on Christmas Eve from the balcony upstairs, that old church on Belmont and Hawley. I can still see it, and I can still hear the music.
When they arrived here carrying so little else, our parents, or their grandparents, brought with them these wonderful gifts. They cannot be unwrapped, cannot be held. They are precious and fragile, yet strong enough to bind families across time and distance. Ours to enjoy only for a while, and then to give away again. For that is how we keep them, these holiday traditions that bring us home.
I have never been away from my mother and father except when they died. Okay, and that was very difficult. It was extremely difficult because my parents were such an important part of the celebration of Christmas. My mother and father taught me so much about the religious aspects of the holiday, along with the cooking. And I could see my mother cooking and baking, and that was very difficult. But what made me get through the holiday was that if my mother had entrusted all these traditions and all these recipes in me, I had to do it to pass it on to my children and now my grandchildren. I guess maybe that's what's nice about traditions. Not much of them change. You may have to adapt some here and there, but you do continue to do the same thing. And everybody is very, very comfortable with that.
Today, families do not have the time that they used to have, but we really make a concerted effort to make time, especially at Christmas, to be together. And as a result, it's changed, so you have a lot of wonderful memories from the past, but I don't regret any of the Christmases I have today with my wife and with my children, because I think they're better than ever. I think we have a life that's better than ever. Thank God my parents were able to come to this country as immigrants. They came here with nothing, and they left a nice legacy, a wonderful legacy of prosperity and good health and good family life. And that's really what's important. And I really look forward to every holiday at Christmas, because that's what we learned from our parents, and that continues. It's not the number of gifts, it's not the price of those gifts. It's just being together as a family.